better to be white because things go right.
Lighter and lovelier.
He calls me James, and I call him Mr. Manila.
Diamonds, they're a woman's best friends. Did something change?
What does freedom mean when it leads to all this?
The wind of change comes to BBC2.
The magic and mystery of the hare is revealed in tonight's Wildlife on 2 in half an hour. As computer technology becomes part of everyday life, a new programme comes to BBC2 now. Be you beginner, buff, or somewhere in between.
Ident tonight. Rajan Datar reports on the clash between right and left on Germany's computer network. Rock musician Thomas Dolby on making music for interactive adventures. Plus our games reviewer Jules. How to get hooked on the internet. And commercial realities for virtual reality.
On April the 20th, Germany's growing number of neo-Nazis try to celebrate the anniversary of Hitler's birthday. And every year, the German authorities try and stop them. Up until recently, the intelligence services have managed to limit the activities of the far right by monitoring their phone calls and intercepting their mail. But now the German government has a big problem. The fascists have gone high-tech. The head of the Secret Service in Hamburg has the job of keeping tabs on extremist groups. He's worried about the new computer networks or electronic mailbox systems set up by the far right.
Bei der traditionellen Überwachung des Post- und Fernmeldeverkehrs haben wir es mit kurzen Informationen zu tun.
We can control traditional communications like post and telephones, not least because they involve the transmission of small pieces of information. With computer mailboxes, however, it is possible to transmit large quantities of material in a very, very short space of time. Reading and decoding this has become a major challenge for the intelligence services, especially since you need passwords to gain access to these systems.
The neo-Nazi scene in Germany has been very fragmented, and the mailbox system, the mailbox network, is one chance of getting together again. The computer networks allow them to collect information about enemies, left-wing extremists, about journalists. They can transport information. For example, we get out of it the manual how to build bombs. They can coordinate demonstrations, and they are not to be controlled by police and other sorts of state organizations. The main fascist computer network in Germany is called the Tulernet. Wolfgang Henning was instrumental in setting it up. He doesn't hide his loathsome views and boasts about his grandiose dream to unite European fascists over the wires.
The new computer networks, in particular the Tulernet, have played a crucial role in the way different right-wing groups in Germany deal with each other. Thanks to the Tulernet, we talk to each other now, which previously wasn't the case. We hope that by the end of the year our network will have spread to the Netherlands, Belgium and possibly England, where we have been dealing with the British National Party.
While the far right may find it easy to evade the attentions of the Secret Service, they still aren't always going to get an easy ride of it. These are the Hafenstrasse squats, where Hamburg's left-wing groups gather and organise. Anti-fascists here are keen to carry on the fight from the streets onto the computer networks. Now this looks like a pretty basic operation, but Rolf Werdemann is one of only 20 to 30 people in the whole of Germany able to hack in to the fascist network. And we're now going to actually try and tap in to a far-right mailbox. Can we do that now?
Okay. Now I've dialed the number. This is one of the propaganda mailboxes. We got the intro of the mailbox, and now I got my name in.
Can you tell me in general what information then you can gather from these mailboxes?
Zum einen gibt es Propaganda, die man am besten
The
aus
more
der Jugend
easily
weiß.
accessed parts of the network are full of fascist propaganda, but the restricted areas contain hit lists of political opponents, saying whether they should be killed or just beaten up. We try to counter their propaganda by talking to the people who use the mailboxes and exposing the contradictions in what the fascists say. We also collect strategic information about fascist groups, their structure and their numbers, and if we have to, we can crash the system. But we don't really like doing that because it prevents us from gathering further information.
The German government, however, is unhappy about its lack of control over the networks and is considering legislation that would limit the use of computers by both far-right and far-left groups.
There's a working group within our government which is discussing the whole problem from mailboxes via digital telecommunication systems and so on. And I would say that in the next period of the Bundestag, there will be a new law to make it easier to fight against those problem issues.
The fascists in Germany command only very limited support, but this man, Christian Worsch, tipped to be the next Führer of the fragmented far-right, is seen as a serious political threat. He's undeterred by the possibility of restrictions on computer use. Will you break the law if necessary if they do introduce this legislation?
I did not believe that they do so.
But would you if you had to?
If they do so, it is against our constitution, and if they act against our constitution, you are, as a German subject, as a civil in German, are allowed to break the law.
You will break the law?
I did not say that I personally will, but everybody is allowed to do so.
It's not just political extremists who oppose the government's desire to clamp down on computer networks and mailboxes. Many ordinary computer users here believe it represents a dangerous move towards censorship. What do you think of the use of computer networks by far-right groups in Germany?
Well, I think it's greatly exaggerated, and for me it's a media hype, and used by politicians to suppress the free communication that is possible in the networks, in the free networks.
But, you know, there is a problem with the fascists using and communicating on the computer networks. Surely it's good that they are being stopped.
Well, if you want freedom, you have to accept that people use the freedom and maybe even abuse it. But if you have a society that is strong enough and has enough common sense, it's no problem. And the network community has this common sense, I think. And the politicians should have some more confidence in the citizens.
But if the politicians decide that they don't have confidence in their citizens, there's still a minefield ahead of them. Exactly how do you police something as technically complex as the networks?
Most kids' video games have really dull music. The same little bleeps and blips repeat over and over until you get to the next level. Games for adults are getting more sophisticated.
There's someone in my apartment. Stay here and cover me.
Real actors, high production values, just like proper movies.
An emergency alarm going off now.
But a movie is a linear experience, which music can easily enhance. Whereas most of these new interactive dramas are actually a series of branching choices, pre-recorded segments so that you can have pre-recorded sections of soundtrack to accompany them. But storing all the possible tracks for every possible outcome is hugely demanding and expensive and still not at all versatile. But a good game or a good theme park ride is like a little world unto itself, and like the worlds we live in, the sounds we hear are associated with individual people and places. In a world where the sounds we hear are generated by our actions compose the soundtrack to our lives. And the everyday objects around us become our musical instruments. Even the mood that I'm in on a given day will affect the kind of music that I generate. One day I may be feeling very laid back, and another day, very aggressive. Video games and virtual reality usually allow us to escape to somewhere a little bit more glamorous than a kitchen. And yet the music is usually so irritating that I end up turning it off altogether. But I started thinking about how the objects and the spaces in my everyday life generated their own soundtrack. And I began to wonder whether I could maybe take the objects and spaces and the goals, the treasures in a computer game and write a computer program that would allow me to attach musical events to those actions within the game. In this little scenario, I've come up with an imaginary game in which the object is to go into a cave and to get a key from an old alchemist who lives there. Legend has it that he has some strange creature that lurks in the cave with him. Now, once I'm inside the cave, I can spend as long or as short a time as I like just looking around. But then a different kind of player might decide he wants to get through it very, very quickly. And my program has to know how I'm playing the game. Now, the level of my cursor activity actually dictates the tempo of the music. Steal the treasure. Uh-oh. Frighten the bats. When the old alchemist comes, I'm going to kung fu kick him, steal the key, and get the hell out.
What hath ears but no eyes, and hair but no teeth?
Hey, give me a break, old man. Aggressive approach wasn't the answer either. You may notice, though, that the same musical elements were basically being used there to give me a far more tense and dramatic soundtrack. Everything was locked to a higher tempo and a different key signature. Now, each one of these sounds is actually stored in the computer as a sample. So behind the scenes, I have a little mixer, and what I'm really doing by moving my cursor around is pushing these faders up and down, just like faders on a regular mixing desk. So, as I move around a space, I'm actually varying the mix in real time by pushing the faders up and down. Look at the treasure. Steal the treasure. Look at the bats. Frighten the bats. If you go and look at these individual samples, there's actually a kind of a virtual keyboard here. Which is playing melodies based on what I do within the game.
What hath ears but no eyes? What hath ears but no eyes? And hair but go then and claim thy bounty. What hath ears but no eyes? And hair but no teeth?
Why, corn on the cob, of course. Thank you.
Go then and claim thy bounty. But mark me well.
Yes?
Depart not by the way you came.
Try this way. The technique of attaching a melody to a particular character or action is not particularly new. Prokofiev did it in Peter and the Wolf, and film music composers have been doing it ever since. But a film is a passive experience, whereas a video game or virtual reality is interactive and non-linear and unpredictable. For the first time with this program Aviary, it's possible to generate a musical score which is always appropriate to the dramatic and emotional setting of the game.
Next, in our weekly games review, Jules gives the lowdown on Super Mario Land 3 for the Game Boy. And still to come in the net, dialing into the internet. Plus, virtual reality gets real in Leicester.
This is my mum and this is my dad. This is my carpet, this is my table. Oh yes, and that's my garden. I'm Jules, and this is my Switch. And this is Mario Land, where happy people lead happy lives with happy moustaches and happy hats and really happy dungarees, living in happy castles with even happier friends. Basically, it's one big happy family. However, killer cacti, ferocious tortoises and naughty clouds are fed up of big happy family, and they decide to bring havoc to this happy land. After many adventures, there is yet another one, Super Mario Land 3 on the Game Boy. This time you play Wario, one of Mario's naughty enemies, who's a big-headed type. He's decided to have the best castle around, and castles are expensive, so off he goes finding treasure to buy it. Like all adventures before, you have to skiddle about, hop, skip and jumping over naughty creatures, bashing into blocks, collecting money and finding hats. Yep, hats. There to help you in your quest, enabling you to fly, give you a dragon's breath, and sometimes make you a big bloater, so that you can bash everything in sight. Sadly, Wario's task is a lot more difficult than Mario's ever was. Warning, this game is not for novices. Be prepared for a very difficult quest. But it does look good. Oh, by the way, out of 10, I'll give it a 7.
We call this series The Net because the real future of computers lies in telecommunications. Computers can communicate over small local networks and giant nets that span the globe. The network of networks is called the Internet, one of the fastest growing means of communication in the world. One of Britain's most experienced net surfers is Davy Winder, and he's also one of the best guides around the Internet. The word Internet is linked with words and expressions like information superhighway and cyberspace, and I'm confused.
A lot of people are confused. You needn't be. The internet is a network of computers. It's a network of computer networks. The information superhighway, as the Americans call it. It's a lovely term, but it's complete crap. It means nothing to anybody. What we're talking about here is a method of communication. Again, a bit like the telephone. When the telephone first hit the streets, it was a very small elite that could actually use the telephone because you couldn't afford it. Now everybody's got a phone. There's very few people that haven't. And that's going to happen with the internet.
Okay, well tell me the basics of the tools that you need to get onto the internet.
To get onto the internet, one of these, a computer. That computer can be anything. It doesn't have to be some super powerful box. You're talking about a simple home computer. Plus you need a modem, which is just a magic box that allows your computer to talk to the telephone. You plug your computer into the modem, you plug your modem into the telephone line. Then your computer can talk to another computer on the other side of the world via the telephone. That's all you need, plus some software in between to make it easier so you can see what you're actually doing. The only real costs that you've got are the cost of using the telephone. You have to pay British Telecom or Mercury, because if you don't, you get in trouble. And the cost of using the services themselves. Some services actually charge you to use them, others are free.
So how do we get onto the internet?
It's actually quite easy these days because everything's point and click. On the screen here, we've got a whole list of menus, lots of different windows, lots of little pictures. All you do is click on something and something happens. Those noises are the little magic box talking to another little magic box at the other end and saying, who the hell are you? And we now have a little screen here asking for a login, which is why we call it logging on. As we speak, we are now live on Kix. Kix, if you like, is a gateway for me. It's my local system. It's just
a very cheap telephone call. I can jump onto the internet if I want to. And all the time while I'm then talking directly, connected directly to a computer in Japan, I'm only paying for a telephone call to Surbiton. And these names are the people that are logged onto the system at the moment. So if I wanted to talk to any of these, I can actually chat to them if they want to talk, or I can send them electronic mail. I can actually send a letter to a friend of mine. Now that guy could be based anywhere in the world as long as he's got access to this system.
And there are different gateways onto the internet.
In the UK there are two main ways at the moment of doing this. One is Kix, which we looked at before, the CompuLink Information Exchange. The alternative to that is a thing called Daemon Internet Services. They're the two main ways at the moment, although a third is coming into the scene, which is CompuServe, and now getting internet access.
And that's what we're on now, CompuServe.
Which is what we're on now. We've just logged into CompuServe. We're just having a look here at the reference section.
But however you get onto the internet, you will find something to suit your taste, and a few surprises. You can find out about travel and tourism, music and art, cooking and gardening. You can even find dinosaurs.
But once you've got the code, once you've got into the world, is it as daunting as it seems when you're just a lay person? Because it does have a slight feel of it about being a bit elitist.
I think some people would like it to remain elitist, but that ain't going to happen because this is a communications network for the world. Everybody's going to use it.
If you want to get onto the internet, contact the BBC Networking Club, which has details of the companies offering access. And from May, the club itself can offer internet access for the cost of a monthly subscription and a starter kit with specially designed software. And tonight, as we come off air, the BBC's own Internet Bulletin Board goes live for the first time.
To find out more, set your video to record Netcetera in the closing credits. That's the burst of information from and about the programme after the credits. You'll have to set your video and